Hello everybody, I am QuirkyKirkHax, the unprofessional pen tester, and today we're here to talk about the scanning and enumeration phase of pen testing. This stage ideally should be the longest and most involved, because every other step depends on this in order to allow more access to systems. Before we go over a few essential tools, however, I'd like to give a grossly oversimplified demonstration of how computer networking works and how data is transferred between computers. Don't worry, this won't take super long since I assume most of you have a decent grasp on this stuff. But on the off chance that you don't, this is the bare basics. Skip to wherever I say to skip to if you want me to just get on with the tools. Ready? All right. So, fundamentally, there are two ways that data is sent across the network. One is via TCP, which is a connection or session-based protocol, and the other just sends it and prays it makes it there, called UDP. TCP uses this thing called the three-way handshake to establish a connection in order to transfer data, and it looks something like this. Basically, the machine attempts to start a connection to an IP on an open port to the server by sending a SYN packet, basically asking permission to start a connection. The receiving machine sends back a SYN-ACK, an acknowledgement of the SYN packet being received, and that a connection is possible. Note that if the port is closed, the server will send back an RST, basically refusing the connection and shutting down the entire process. It's important to note that the refusal of a connection in this case is explicit. You are getting a response back. Finally, the sending machine sends an acknowledgement of an acknowledgement, and establishing the connection proper, and then data transmission can begin. This process is relatively involved, and compared to UDP, it's a little slow, but it does create reliable connections and actually has error checking on transmissions. TCP is where you're going to encounter the majority of open ports on OSCP and pen testing in general, I would assume. UDP, on the other hand, sends the data. That's it. People sometimes erroneously call this the unreliable data protocol because it's unreliable. It sends it in, you're not guaranteed that they're going to hit the target. But while this protocol is unreliable, it's fast. You see this a lot on VoIP data or game streaming data where packets need to hit their target fast and drop packets won't completely destroy everything in the process. As far as the OSCP goes, you may see UDP on DNS or DHCP or some custom application. You should definitely scan for UDP ports, but I would recommend limiting your ports to the most common just because it takes extra time, but I digress. So, either I just gave you a somewhat brief introduction to networking, or you skipped to the point where I explained why it's important. I wanted to briefly cover some of this because it's important to understand how data travels in order to understand how nmap is scanning things. Nmap is your de facto port scanner, and it's probably going to be your most used application in Kali, and especially the OSCP. Every box will begin with a port scan with Nmap, even if you're using automated tools like Auto Recon. It's a great program with a lot of neat features, so let's shut the hell up and talk about what it can do. Like I mentioned, Nmap is a port scanner, and it has a few modes to scan things. There are three primary scan modes that Nmap uses to get results. Firstly, there's a stealth scan, or the TAC S capital S flag. The way this one works is by sending a SYN packet to a port, and if it gets a SYN-ACK back, it takes that as confirmation that the port is open. The stealth option never completes the TCP connection, which at one time was considered stealthy, but modern firewalls and logging solutions kind of make that not the case anymore. Though in a real engagement, this is probably what I would end up using. That said, it still is stealthier than the next type of scan, which is the full TCP scan or the -S capital T flag. This goes through the entire three-way handshake in order to get the confirmation that a port is open. It's a very loud scan, obviously, and I wouldn't necessarily run this on all ports in a real engagement. That said, during labs and exams, I tend to use this one over the stealth scan option just because, screw it. And then finally, we have the UDP scan option, TAC S capital U. This one just sends specific payloads for common ports to get a response back, hopefully, or a blank one to unknown ports, just praying it gets there and you get something back. This one tends to be the most unreliable for obvious reasons, but it is important to always run at least one UDP scan on a box in the lab or exams. I've had one or two enumeration chunks missed by not doing this and being lost for an hour. Learn from my mistakes. Some other miscellaneous options we have here are the -P for specifying what ports you want to use. You can do -p dash for all ports, or name a specific port if you just need to verify one thing. You can also do nmap tac top tac ports 1000 for a more narrow search if you need to save time or want just something quick and dirty. I recommend doing a small scan like this during pivoting or SSH tunneling, but we'll get to that eventually. So just for fun, let's run a quick nmap scan and just see what the results look like. Alright, so for this first just general example, we're going to do a stealth scan on just my home server that I've got, web dashboard, Nginx proxy, and that's all I remember that's on this right now. So we have sudo nmap -s capital S for stealth scan, then the IP address. And let's see what happens. Would help if I was in the active menu. Type in my password. And we let and set this marinate for a minute. It shouldn't take too long. Okay, cool. So we see we have SSH, DNS, web proxies. There you go. All right, so we didn't get a whole lot of really good information out of that other than just open ports. So one thing that I almost always put on my scans when I run them is the V argument. Oh, the V argument. And that's for version. It'll tell you like what version of SSH, what DNS, what web proxy, and so on. So let's take a look at that real quick. There we go. All right, so with this, we see OpenSSH 89p1. We see Ubuntu, so we know it's an Ubuntu server. We get Apache Tomcat for this port 9090. I'm not going to hack my own home network, but you know, these are just things to look for, or things that show up when you do this. If we run the ST for a full TCP scan, we should get the exact same results. Probably take a good bit longer because it's having to actually complete the session, or complete the connection rather. But otherwise, it's the exact same output. Okay, yeah, like I said, exact same output. So another thing, it's not useful for this, but for demonstration purposes, if I wanted to specifically look across a series of IP addresses for port 80, you know, I could search for, you know, that single port across that IP address, or and I would get the results. Or as a matter of fact, I could do 192.168.0 to 255. Is that how you do that? This will probably take a good bit, but this should theoretically scan the entire network, or the 1.0 network. I think you can also do /24. I think you can do CIDR notation. Yeah, there you go. So you see a bunch of filtered stuff, but let's see. Wish I had outputted that so I could grep the output, but where's my thingy? So we can see that. Oh. There we go. We see a few servers on my network that have port 80 open. But like I said, we're just having fun here and just demonstrating some neat stuff. So other than specify, you can also specify multiple ports if you wanted to do something like just search for web ports, common web ports. Or if you wanted to search for every single port on a device or a network, you can do that, and that goes through all however many ports there are. If I was a little bit more prepared, I could tell you the number, but I'll have it on screen. It's a big ass number. Just for fun, let's do a UDP scan, because why not? I'm just going to do the default. I'm not specifying ports because this will take forever. The thing that sucks about UDP port or UDP scanning is, so when you do a SYN scan or a TCP scan and a port's closed, you're going to get an RST packet back. You're getting an explicit denial for that connection. With UDP, if you scan and the port's or if the port doesn't send anything back, one of two things can be happening. You can either A, assume the port is actually closed, which is probably likely, or number two, maybe it just didn't make it there. So it's It also takes a little bit longer because nmap is trying to verify things and make absolutely certain that a port is open before it reports it as open. You usually see a lot of ports being marked as filtered with UDP for that reason, but as I will, I'll cut all this dead space and see what we can find here. And there you go. You can see it took for freaking ever to run a UDP scan with the default ports, which is why I suggest doing something like top 100 or some such. But yeah, the only UDP port we have open on that machine is DNS, which is about what you should expect. So just for clarity's sake, if you're going to be doing a UDP scan explicitly and not automating, this is probably what I would run. The top port's 100, maybe 1,000 if I was feeling frisky, but like I said, UDP takes a long time. It's unreliable. You know, I wouldn't do more than 1,000 if I would even do that. But the top ports thing is really useful for this. And also when you're doing SSH tunneling, again, I know I keep mentioning that, but the tac top tac ports is a really useful tool if you just need quick and dirty scans. So just something to keep in mind. I'm very nearly out of super useful things to talk about with nmap, but there are two more I want to bring up. Number one is the output. You can output the nmap results into different formats. You can do normal, where it's just copying the straight up text that you see. You can do XML, whatever the hell script kitty is. I genuinely don't know what the hell that is. I'll probably look that up later. And greppable format, which is generally what I end up doing. You can also just output it to all of them if you'd like to do that. So just for the sake of, again, demonstration purposes here, I'm going to run another scan, and we're going to do OA and just see what this format looks like, because I'm actually not sure. Actually, I'm not going to do an UDP scan. I'm going to do... let's do just a normal TCP scan and just do that. Oh, whoops! I actually need to specify the name, don't I? Uh, yeah, I gotta specify a file name. Demo or nmap underscore demo. I probably shouldn't be putting this in my home directory because I'm creating multiple files, but I'll remove them later. So I'll let this marinate for a minute before I show what all these different formats look like. I'll see you momentarily. Okay, so the results are done. Just for sake of demonstration purposes, I'm going to cat out nmap demo. If I could type nmap, this should just be the normal one where it's just the normal results you've seen. Not a shock to anybody. XML. I'm sure there's certain applications you can import that file to look at the results more closely, but I personally have never used that for anything effective in my entire life. So if anybody in the comments wants to tell me what I can use this for and how you use it, please feel free. And then we have gnmap for the greppable format, which basically you can just cat this, and if I wanted to grep out SSH, there you go. Honestly, I would just do the straight up nmap and then grep that out. But again, I'm sure somebody can tell me why I'm an idiot and why you would use the other one. But those are the nmap output formats. I don't think there's any harm in just outputting to all of it in case you need it. Again, assuming you're not automating with some other application, but 9 times out of 10, it's also doing that under the hood anyway. So this is just to show what is working and how. The other thing is a bit more involved, so prepare yourself. So this last thing is probably the single most useful thing about nmap and why it's so versatile and why everybody loves it so much. Is not only is it good for port scanning, there's also a scripting engine that comes with it, and there's a lot of pre-packaged scripts in there that help with enumeration a lot, as well as if you wanted to create your own scripts, be my guest, but I'm not a programmer, so I'm not doing that. But anyway, the scripting engine I believe is in Lua. I'm gonna say it's Lua, and if I'm wrong, somebody can yell at me in the comments. But just for an example here, again for demonstration purposes, I've got a NAS running on my home network that's got about 70 terabytes worth of hardcore anime porno. And as you can see, port 445 is open because, I need Samba access so I can, watch my hentai on my Windows machine. So all of the scripts for nmap are located in user share nmap scripts. And you can see there's just a crap ton of stuff for every protocol, or a lot of protocols. I shouldn't say all of them. But if you want to run something specific or just look through on a by protocol basis, you can just grep that out and do like SMB because that's what we're doing this for now. And you can see, we've got SMB2 capabilities. There's a few on here for Microsoft CVEs like MS1710, that's Eternal Blue. You got PSExec, you've got SMB OS Discovery, which in my experience just does not work well. But anyway, I'm going to use SMB protocols just for demonstration. And this one, I believe, just shows the supported protocol. So it'll tell you what version of SMB it's running, if it's SMB 2, 3, yada, 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 yada. So in order to do that, all you have to do is go to your nmap scripts and do tac script equals SMB protocols. It would help if I could spell today. Okay, and then we sit and let that run. And there we go. So you can see I'm running SMB 2 and 3, several different dialects. And yeah, if you wanted to run, again, we're just doing SMB here for fun. But if you wanted to run every SMB script that they had, you can do SMB star and so on. Another thing you can do, I believe, is just to run -A, and that should run every script on every port that comes up. This takes a crap ton of time, but if you're interested in being thorough, I believe that is correct. Let me make sure I don't want to lie to you all. Enable OS detection, version detection, script scanning, yeah, and traceroute. So -A does literally everything you could ever want it to do. I just like doing things one at a time or spelling it out specifically because that's how I roll. But yeah, that's pretty much all the stuff for nmap that I can just give you as a quick and dirty demonstration. The rest, I would heavily recommend you go out, go to Hack the Box or try Hack Me, and just mess around with nmap. This is a very bare bones, just these are the basic steps for it. There is one more tool, though, I do want to show off before I go because it's an extremely basic tool, but it's also, because it's so basic, it's extremely vertical. Yeah, it's extremely versatile. So ncat is also created by the same people who do nmap, and it is basically a tool that allows you to create open ports to listen on and connect to sessions connect to open ports in a very basic way. I know that's a bad explanation, but I'll show you what I mean here shortly. All right, so like I mentioned, ncat is a program that allows us to open ports on our machine to get connections back to, as well as to connect forward to other open ports that already exist. So for this first example, I'm going to open up port 21, which is the default port for FTP with ncat. Just a little breakdown of the command here. The L is for listen, so we're opening a port up on our side. V is for verbose, so anytime there's any kind of information regarding this connection, it'll give us some extra data. N is for no DNS resolution. I don't know that it's necessary to use in this case, but I don't think it hurts, so I'm throwing that in there too. And P, probably won't surprise any of you at this point, is to specify what port we are opening up, which in this case is port 21. So if I run this command, so we're officially listening on all interfaces on port 21. And here on my left terminal, that has some really screwed up text spacing for some reason. know why. I'm just going to FTP penis at 127.0.0.1. And so if we connect to our loopback address with FTP, presumably we'll see something on the ncat side. And we do. So you don't see something super useful from this in this case, but this is a pretty solid example of what we're going to see when we start getting to reverse shells. Because that's essentially what we've done here is we've opened up a port and then we're calling back to it. We're not able to actually do anything fun with it, but that's the nitty-gritty. Similarly, let me exit, or is it exit for FTP? Yes. So similarly, if we do that again, if we think about having FTP open, or port 21 open on another machine to connect to, we can also do ncat 127.0.0.1 space 21, and then this should connect us to it should connect us to port 21 on our loopback address, which should do a similar thing. And there you go. As far as super useful use cases for this, I don't want to show off too much just yet, because we're going to have a whole section later on reverse shells and bind shells and fancy things you can do. You can set ncat to start a process or program once it's been connected to, but again, we're going to go over all that during the reverse shell stuff. The reason I bring it up now in the enumeration section is occasionally you will find ports during labs or exams or so on, what have you, that do not give any information at all back from nmap or any other reconnaissance tool. You'll just get a port number and maybe it'll just say unknown or something. Very occasionally, and I make sure to do this usually whenever I'm doing my enumeration phase, if I can't get anything out of it, I'll connect to it through ncat. And very rarely I will get some kind of response back that I can use to research a bit more. Usually it's nothing super crazy, but I might get some weird output, and then I can search that output along with the port and I'll find something. But I wanted you to know this tool existed, know that it's useful not only for reverse shells and the exploitation phase, but it can also be pretty decent on enumeration. But yeah, those are the two most important tools when it comes to enumeration and reconnaissance. Like I said, every pen test is going to begin with you using nmap, more or less. So get familiar. Your homework for this video is to go out to the labs, experiment with nmap, do some scans, learn some tips and tricks, maybe try and find a way to automate your workflow. Yeah, that's all I got. I'll see you next time. Next one, we're going to put some more fingers to keys and maybe do some actual fun stuff when it comes to enumerating specific ports. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.